standing in the marble-floored atrium of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's American Wing, champagne flute in hand, watching my mother-in-law Victoria accept congratulations for putting together such an extraordinary auction. I felt my phone buzz in my clutch. It was a text from Bernard Castellane, the French collector who'd loaned us the 3 Monet water lily studies that everyone was currently photographing. Diane, ma chérie, I hope your mother-in-law knows how lucky she is to have you. Those pieces left my vault only because of our friendship. I looked up at Victoria, resplendent in her navy Oscar de la Renta gown, holding court with the museum's board president and 2 major donors. She was gesturing toward the Monets with the practiced grace of someone who spent 40 years married to old money, describing the incredible effort it took to secure them. Not once did she mention my name. That's when I realized something important. For 5 years, I'd been trying to earn my place at the Ashford family table. Tonight, I finally understood I'd been setting that table all along. Let me back up. My name is Diane Harper, and I'm the senior curator of post-impressionist art at one of the country's most prestigious museums. It's a position I earned after 12 years of graduate work, museum internships that paid barely above minimum wage, and countless hours building relationships with collectors, galleries, and artists' estates across 3 continents. When I met Christopher Ashford at a gallery opening 6 years ago, I was already successful in my own right. I didn't need his family's money or connections. I had my own. But Victoria Ashford saw things differently. To her, I was the girl from suburban New Jersey whose father owned a hardware store and whose mother taught elementary school. No matter that I had a PhD from Columbia or that my last exhibition catalog had been featured in the Times, to Victoria, I would always be the daughter-in-law who worked at a museum, which she said with the same tone other people might use for works at a mall. Our annual charity gala was Victoria's pride and joy. As chair of the gala committee for 15 years, she'd turned it into the museum's biggest fundraiser, regularly bringing in over $2 million for acquisitions and education programs. This year, she'd set her sights even higher, $3 million. And for the first time, she'd asked me to help. Diane, darling, she'd said 6 months ago over lunch at her club, I know you have connections in the art world. Perhaps you could reach out to a few people about donating pieces for the auction. I should have seen it then, the careful way she phrased it. Not I'd love to collaborate with you or your expertise would be invaluable. Just a request to use my Rolodex while she took the bows. But I wanted so badly to finally be included, to be seen as family, that I said yes. More than yes, I threw myself into it. I called in every favor I had. Bernard Castellane, my former advisor who'd become a dear friend, agreed to loan the 3 Monet studies pieces worth approximately $6 million that he'd never loaned to anyone. I convinced a reclusive collector in Santa Fe to part with a stunning Georgia O'Keeffe that hadn't been seen publicly in 40 years. I spent 3 days in Paris negotiating with a gallery owner for a Renoir sketch that I knew would be the crown jewel of our Impressionist section. In total, I secured 17 pieces for the auction. Victoria secured 4, all from her society friends' pleasant enough works, but nothing that would make collectors open their checkbooks. During the planning meetings, I noticed a pattern. Whenever the committee praised the quality of the auction items, Victoria would smile graciously and say something vague like, well, when you've been doing this as long as I have, you learn who to call. Once, when a board member specifically asked about the Monet studies, she launched into a story about visiting Giverny years ago, implying some deep connection to Impressionist collectors. She never mentioned my name. Not once in 6 months of planning. Christopher, my husband, told me I was being too sensitive. Mom's just excited about the gala, he'd say, looking up from his laptop where he was reviewing contracts for his law firm. You know how she gets about her committee work. It's not personal. But it felt personal when Victoria introduced me to donors at pre-gala events as Christopher's wife without mentioning I worked at the museum. It felt personal when she seated me at table 17 for the gala, nowhere near the family table because the seating chart is so complex, darling, and we needed you near the junior curators. It felt personal when I overheard her telling someone at a cocktail party that I helped out with educational programming, as if I was a volunteer docent and not a senior curator with my name on the building's donor wall. My best friend Rachel, who taught art history at NYU, had warned me. Diane. She's using you, she'd said over coffee 2 weeks before the gala. You've done all the actual work, and she's going to take all the credit. You know that, right? I defended Victoria then. She's not that calculating. She's just traditional. She doesn't understand the museum world. Rachel had given me a look that said everything her words didn't. But I'd ignored it because I wanted so desperately to believe that this gala would finally prove to Victoria that I belonged in the Ashford family. The night of the gala, I arrived early to check on the auction pieces. Everything was perfect. The Monet studies glowed under carefully positioned lighting. The O'Keeffe practically vibrated with color and life. The Renoir sketch, small and intimate, drew people close. As a curator, there's no better feeling than seeing pieces you've selected displayed exactly as you'd envisioned. Victoria arrived an hour later, already holding court with early VIP guests. She wore that navy de la Renta and her grandmother's sapphire choker, what Christopher called her armor for important events. She swept through the gallery spaces, accepting compliments with practiced grace. When Bernard Castellane arrived and made his way directly to me with a warm kiss on both cheeks, I saw Victoria's eyes narrow. "Diane, you've outdone yourself," Bernard said in his accented English. "The placement of the studies is perfection. You have your mother's eye for color harmony." Victoria appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Castellane, how wonderful to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your collection." "Ah, yes, Madam Ashford," Bernard replied politely. "Diane speaks very highly of your charity work." Notice, I thought, how he made it clear he knew me first. But Victoria pressed on, launching into a conversation about Impressionism that drew on every coffee table book she'd ever skimmed. Bernard was too polite to excuse himself, but I caught him glancing at me with barely concealed amusement. The evening progressed. The auction preview was a tremendous success. Every piece I'd secured had attracted serious bidders. The museum director, Dr. Patricia Chen, pulled me aside during cocktail hour. "Diane, this is extraordinary work. The board is thrilled. We're projecting the highest grossing auction in the museum's history." I felt a warm glow of pride. For a moment, I thought this might actually be the night when Victoria finally acknowledged me as an equal. Maybe when the director made her speech, she'd mention my contributions. Maybe during the family photos, I'd finally stand with the Ashfords instead of offering to take the picture. That's not what happened. When the time came for the official program, Victoria stood at the podium in her designer gown and thanked everyone who'd made the evening possible. She thanked the committee members by name. She thanked the museum staff. She thanked the wonderful curators who helped facilitate the loans. Plural. Generic. As if I were just one anonymous staffer among many. Christopher, seated next to me at table 17, squeezed my hand. "You know she appreciates you," he whispered. But I was watching Victoria's face as she worked the crowd after her speech. She was in her element, basking in the attention, accepting praise for her vision and her connections in the art world. A major donor, someone I recognized from the board, approached her specifically to ask about the Monet studies. "How on earth did you convince Bernard Castellane to loan those pieces?" the donor asked. "I've been trying to get him to work with us for years." I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment when Victoria would say, "Actually, those were secured by my daughter-in-law, our senior curator." This was when she'd gesture to me, pull me into the conversation, finally give credit where it was due. Instead, Victoria smiled that society smile and said, "Well, when you've spent as much time in the art world as I have, you learn that relationships are everything. It's all about trust and shared passion for preservation." My hands went cold. She just claimed credit for a relationship that had taken me 15 years to build, starting when Bernard was my doctoral advisor and I was a broke graduate student who could barely afford to attend his lectures in Paris. Christopher must have felt me tense because he leaned in. "Diane, I need some air," I said quietly, standing up. I walked toward the museum's staff entrance, my heels clicking on the marble floors, my composure held together by sheer will. In the curator's office I shared with 2 colleagues, I sat down at my desk and stared at my phone. Rachel had texted, "How's the gala? Has the Dragon Lady given you any credit yet?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Bernard's number. My finger hovered over the call button. This was insane. You don't pull pieces from an auction 90 minutes before bidding starts. It would be professional suicide. It would be petty. It would be. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Diane, we're doing family photos in the main gallery. Where are you?" Finally, I thought. Finally, she wants me in the family photos. I made my way back to the main gallery, where a professional photographer had set up near the Monet studies. The Ashford family was assembling Christopher's father Thomas, Christopher's younger brother James and his wife, even Christopher's cousin Margaret, who lived in California and rarely attended anything. Victoria saw me approaching and smiled. "Oh good, Diane, you're here? Could you just—" She gestured vaguely toward her hair. "Do I look all right? The lighting in here is so tricky." "You look perfect," I said automatically, moving to stand next to Christopher. "Wonderful," Victoria said. Then to the photographer. "All right, I think we're ready. Just the Ashfords, please." I felt Christopher's hand on my elbow, pulling me into the frame. But Victoria's voice cut through. "Christopher, darling, this is just for the family portrait. For the holiday cards. We'll do a larger group photo later." The words hung in the air. Just the Ashfords. After 5 years of marriage, I was still not considered an Ashford. Christopher's hand dropped from my elbow. He didn't argue. He didn't say, "Mom, Diana's family." He just gave me an apologetic look that I'd seen 1,000 times before and stepped into the frame without me. I stood there, outside the photographer's lights, watching my husband pose with his family. Watching Victoria arrange everyone just so, her hand on Christopher's shoulder, her smile brilliant and satisfied. They looked perfect together. Old money, real family, people who belonged. And that's when something in me shifted. Not snapped that would imply emotion, anger, loss of control. No, it was colder than that. It was a clarity I'd never felt before. I was done auditioning for a role in this family. I was done making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I was done setting tables I'd never be invited to sit at. I walked calmly back to my office. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts and made the first call. "Bernard. It's Diane. I'm so sorry to disturb you during the gala, but we have a situation with the insurance certificates for the Monet pieces." My voice was calm, professional. "The museum's insurance company just flagged an issue with the coverage amounts, and our director is concerned about liability. I know this is terrible timing, but would you be comfortable if we withdrew the pieces from the auction tonight and sorted out the paperwork before the next exhibition?" Bernard, confused but trusting, agreed immediately. "Of course, ma chérie. You know I trust your judgment completely. Shall I speak with the museum director?" "No need," I said smoothly. "I'll handle the logistics. I just wanted your approval first." The second call was to Margaret Ashby, the Santa Fe collector with the O'Keefe. "Margaret, hi, it's Diane Harper from the Met. I'm calling because we've had a last-minute security concern flagged for tonight's auction." I explained that some high-value pieces were being withdrawn as a precaution, and would she be comfortable if we did the same with her O'Keefe? We could feature it in a dedicated exhibition next spring instead, with much more publicity and scholarly attention. Margaret was actually relieved. "Honestly, Diane, I've been feeling nervous all week about putting it up for auction. A dedicated exhibition sounds much more appropriate. Thank you for thinking of it." The third call was to the Paris gallery owner about the Renoir sketch. This one required more finesse, but I'd built enough goodwill during our negotiations that when I expressed concerns about auction house fees eating into the proceeds for the artist's estate, he agreed to withdraw and work with us on a private sale instead. 3 phone calls, 12 minutes total. And the Gala's projected revenue had just dropped from $3 million to approximately $900,000. I sat in my office for a moment, feeling nothing but a strange, calm certainty. Then I refreshed my makeup, straightened my shoulders, and walked back into the Gala. The family photos were finishing up. I caught Christopher's eye and gave him a small smile. He looked relieved. "Everything okay?" he whispered when I reached him. "Fine," I said. "Just had to handle a work issue." The cocktail hour continued. The auction preview remained open for another 30 minutes. I circulated through the galleries, accepting compliments on the collection, smiling at donors, playing my role perfectly. Victoria barely noticed me. She was too busy holding court near the Monet studies, explaining Impressionist technique to anyone who would listen. At 8:15, exactly 45 minutes before the auction was scheduled to start, Dr. Chen approached Victoria and me where we stood near the gallery entrance. Her face was pale. "Victoria, Diane, could we speak privately for a moment?" We followed her to a quiet corner. Dr. Chen looked directly at me as she spoke. "Diane, I just received calls from the Castellane office, the Ashby Trust and the Marchand Gallery. They're all withdrawing their pieces from tonight's auction. I watched Victoria's face drain of color. What? That's impossible. Why would they? Insurance concerns with the Monet studies, security protocols with the O'Keeffe, and estate issues with the Renoir sketch, Dr. Chen recited. She was still looking at me, not Victoria, and I saw the exact moment when she understood. Her eyes widened slightly. Diane, did you? I received calls from all 3 lenders this evening, I said calmly. They expressed concerns, and as their primary contact, I recommended we respect their wishes. I documented everything in email, if you need to review my correspondence. It wasn't a lie. I had documented it. I just hadn't mentioned that I'd initiated the calls. Victoria found her voice. But those pieces represent more than 2/3 of our projected auction revenue. We can't withdraw them now. People are here specifically to bid on the Monet studies. I understand your disappointment, I said, my tone perfectly professional. But as a curator, my first responsibility is to the integrity of the loans and the trust of our lenders. If they have concerns, we have to honor them. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. She was a good director. She knew when to fight battles and when to cut losses. You're absolutely right, Diane. We'll make an announcement before the auction begins. She turned to Victoria. I'm so sorry, Victoria. I know how hard you worked on this. After Dr. Chen walked away, Victoria turned to me. Her carefully composed society face had cracked, just slightly. You did this, she said quietly. I don't know how, but you did this. I'm not sure what you mean, I replied, meeting her eyes steadily. I simply responded to concerns from our lenders. That's my job. Your job, Victoria repeated. Her voice was shaking now, anger and shock mixing with something that might have been fear. Your job is to support this museum and this gala, not sabotage it because your feelings were hurt. My feelings weren't hurt, I said, and I meant it. I felt nothing but cold clarity. I was excluded from a family photo. That's fine. You've made it very clear over 5 years that I'm not really family. But you see, Victoria, those art pieces. Those were secured through my relationships. My work. My reputation. Bernard Castellane is my friend and former advisor. Margaret Ashby trusts me because I spent 2 years researching her grandmother's connection to O'Keeffe. The Marchand Gallery works with me because I've brought them 3 museum partnerships. Those aren't your connections. They never were. So you're willing to destroy the gala's success over a photograph? Victoria's voice rose slightly. People were starting to glance our way. I'm not destroying anything, I said quietly. I'm simply being very clear about what's mine and what's yours. You wanted to take credit for my work? Fine. But you can't have my work without me. That's not how professional relationships function. Christopher appeared at my elbow. What's going on? Mom, you look upset. Victoria looked at her son, then at me. Your wife just sabotaged the auction. I protected the museum's relationships with key lenders, I corrected. There's a difference. Christopher looked confused. What happened? Before I could answer, the museum's events coordinator hurried over. Mrs. Ashford, we need to make the announcement about the withdrawn pieces. The auction starts in 30 minutes and people are asking questions. Victoria straightened her shoulders. That society armor sliding back into place. Of course. I'll handle it. She shot me one more look, anger and something else I couldn't quite identify before walking toward the podium. Christopher grabbed my arm. Diane, what the hell is going on? Your mother wanted credit for securing the auction pieces, I said calmly. I decided that if she wanted the credit, she could also have the responsibility. Turns out the lenders only agreed to participate because of their relationships with me, not her. When I explained there were some concerns, they withdrew their pieces. You withdrew the pieces? Christopher stared at me. Are you insane? This is my mother's biggest event of the year. And it's my professional reputation, I replied. Your mother has spent 6 months claiming she secured those pieces through her connections. I simply let her deal with the consequences of that claim. This is petty, Diane. This is beyond petty. Do you have any idea how embarrassed she's going to be? And there it was. His first concern wasn't that his mother had lied, or that I'd been excluded, or that Victoria had spent months taking credit for my work. His first concern was his mother's embarrassment. She excluded me from the family photo, I said quietly. So you torpedoed her charity gala? Christopher's face was red now. Over a photo? No, I said. I withdrew my professional contribution from an event where I was being treated as hired help instead of family. There's a difference. Before Christopher could respond, Dr. Chen approached us again. Diane, could we speak? Privately? I followed her to her office, leaving Christopher standing in the gallery. Dr. Chen closed the door and gestured for me to sit. That was a masterclass in strategic withdrawal, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Want to tell me what really happened? I considered lying. But Dr. Chen had always been fair with me, had supported my career, had fought for my last promotion. Victoria has been taking credit for the pieces I secured, I said. Tonight, she excluded me from family photos and introduced me as if I were a volunteer, not a senior curator. I decided I was done letting her use my work for her social credit. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Good for you. I blinked. I just cost the museum over $2 million in auction revenue. You protected your professional relationships and made it clear that you won't be taken advantage of, Dr. Chen corrected. And frankly, I've watched Victoria Ashford take credit for this museum's work for 15 years. It's about time someone reminded her that the actual expertise comes from our curators, not her society connections. She leaned forward. Those pieces aren't really withdrawn, are they? Not permanently. Bernard's pieces can be featured in our Spring Impressionist exhibition. Margaret wants a dedicated O'Keeffe show, and the Renoir will be a private sale that will benefit the museum's acquisition fund even more than the auction would have. I met her eyes. Everyone wins. Except Victoria's Gala, which brings in operating funds we need, Dr. Chen pointed out. The auction will still raise $900,000 from the remaining pieces, I said. That's not nothing. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. You know she's going to retaliate. I know. And your husband? Is currently deciding whether he's married to me or to his mother's social standing. The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. Dr. Chen stood up. Well, for what it's worth, I'm promoting you to Chief Curator of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist Art. The board approved it last week. I was going to announce it next month, but I think tonight might be a better time. After all, someone needs to coordinate all these new exhibitions we're apparently planning. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time that evening. Thank you, she replied, for reminding me that our curators are the heart of this institution, not the society donors who want to play museum director for a night. The auction went forward with the remaining pieces. Victoria's smile never faltered as she stood at the podium and explained that due to insurance and security protocols, several pieces have been temporarily withdrawn, but we look forward to featuring them in future exhibitions. She was good at this, at making disaster look like planning. The final tally was $847,000. Respectable by most standards, but a far cry from the $3 million Victoria had promised the board. After the auction, after the donors had left and the galleries were being cleaned, Christopher found me in my office. We need to talk about tonight, he said. Yes, I agreed. We do. My mother is devastated. The board is questioning her judgment. Do you have any idea what you've done? I have a very clear idea, I said. I've established that my professional work has value, and that value doesn't belong to your mother's social agenda. Christopher sat down heavily. This isn't about professional work, Diane. This is about you being so petty and vindictive that you'd humiliate my mother in front of the entire New York art world. Your mother humiliated herself, I said, by claiming credit for work she didn't do and relationships she doesn't have. I simply stopped enabling it. She's family. Am I? The question hung in the air. Because tonight, when it came time for family photos, your mother made it very clear that I'm not family. I'm Christopher's wife. I'm the museum employee. I'm someone who can be useful when needed and excluded when convenient. So I decided that if I'm not family, then I don't owe family favors. Christopher was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from me, Diane? I want you to have defended me, I said. I wanted you to say, Mom, Diane is family when she excluded me from the photo. I wanted you to correct her when she introduced me as if my career doesn't exist. I wanted you to be on my side for once instead of always making excuses for her behavior. She's my mother. And I'm your wife. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. For 5 years, Christopher, I have tried so hard to be good enough for your family. I've attended every luncheon, every charity event, every Sunday dinner. I've smiled through your mother's condescending comments about my career and my background. I've watched her take credit for my work and said nothing because I didn't want to cause problems. And tonight, when she literally excluded me from the family, you said nothing. You just stepped into the photo without me. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest, I interrupted. Your mother doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect my career. She sees me as a useful tool when she needs museum connections and an embarrassing burden the rest of the time. And you let her. You always let her. Christopher stood up. I think we need some space. I'm going to stay at my parents' house tonight. Of course he was. Of course, when faced with choosing between his wife and his mother, he chose his mother. That's probably a good idea, I said quietly. After he left, I sat alone in my office and cried. Not for the marriage I think I'd known for a while that it was broken, but for the version of myself who'd spent 5 years trying to earn a place in a family that was never going to accept her. Rachel found me there an hour later. She'd been at the gala, though I'd barely seen her in the crowd. I heard, she said simply, sitting down across from me. Dr. Chen told me about the withdrawn pieces, and I saw the family photo drama. She reached across the desk and took my hand. I'm proud of you. I might have just ended my marriage. You ended your willingness to be disrespected, Rachel corrected. There's a difference. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Victoria tried to have me fired. She actually called the board president and demanded my termination for professional misconduct. Dr. Chen shut that down immediately, presenting the email trail that showed I'd acted appropriately in responding to lender concerns. Christopher's attempt at reconciliation lasted exactly one conversation. He wanted me to apologize to his mother. I wanted him to acknowledge that his mother had been taking credit for my work. We couldn't find middle ground. The divorce papers were filed 2 months later. But something unexpected happened in those 2 months. The art world is smaller than people think, and word got out about what had really occurred at the gala. Not the sanitized version Victoria told her society friends, but the truth that I'd been the one to secure the major pieces, that Victoria had taken credit, that I'd been excluded from family photos and introduced as if my career didn't exist. The response surprised me. Bernard Castellane called to say he'd been appalled to learn how I'd been treated and wanted to work exclusively with me on all future loans. Margaret Ashby reached out to discuss a major gift to the museum specifically earmarked for my department. The Marchand Gallery offered me a consulting position on their advisory board. 6 months after the gala, Dr. Chen called me into her office. The board wants to create a new position, she said. Director of Collections and Partnerships. It would oversee all curatorial departments and manage our relationships with major collectors and lenders. The salary is 60% higher than your current position. Are you offering me this job? I'm telling you it was created specifically for you, Dr. Chen replied. Turns out, the board was very impressed by how you handled the gala situation. They realized that our relationships with lenders and collectors are all built on personal connections with our curators, not society committee members. They want to prioritize and protect those relationships. I took the job. And with my first major project, I organized an exhibition featuring all 3 pieces that had been withdrawn from Victoria's auction: the Monet Studies, the O'Keeffe, and the Renoir Sketch. We called it Private Collections, Public Trust, the Art of the Loan. The exhibition was a massive success. Bernard Castellane flew in from France for the opening. Margaret Ashby gave a lecture about her grandmother's friendship with O'Keeffe. The Marchand Gallery arranged for 2 additional Renoir pieces to complement our sketch. Victoria Ashford was not on the guest list, but Christopher came. I saw him standing in front of the Monet Studies on opening night, looking at the wall text that credited the loan to Bernard Castellane, facilitated by Director of Collections Diane Harper. It's beautiful, he said when he saw me. You did an amazing job. Thank you, I replied politely. My mother stepped down from the gala committee, he said after a moment. She said she wanted to focus on other interests. I had heard. The Art World Gossip Network was efficient. Diane, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About choosing sides. About not defending you. He looked genuinely remorseful. You were right. I should have stood up for you. I should have told my mother that excluding you from family photos was unacceptable. Yes, I agreed. You should have. Is there any chance? No, I said gently but firmly. I spent 5 years trying to be enough for your family. I'm done with that. I'd rather spend my energy on people and institutions that value what I actually bring to the table. Christopher nodded slowly. You look happy. Happier than I've seen you in years. He was right. Standing in the galleries I'd curated, surrounded by pieces I'd secured through relationships I'd built, recognized and respected for the work I actually did, I was happy. Not the desperate, striving happiness of trying to earn approval I'd never get, but the quiet, solid happiness of knowing my worth. I am happy, I said. And I meant it. The Gala incident became one of those stories that gets told in museum circles, usually late at night at conferences, after a few glasses of wine. The time a curator quietly dismantled a society matron's vanity project by withdrawing the pieces she'd secured but hadn't been credited for. The time someone gently reminded the old guard that relationships matter more than last names. I didn't do it for revenge, though it probably looked that way. I did it because I finally understood something important. You can't force people to value you, and you shouldn't have to, but you can absolutely refuse to let them benefit from work they don't appreciate. Standing in the museum tonight, looking at the exhibition that wouldn't have existed without that Gala disaster, I don't regret a single phone call I made that night. I regret the years I spent trying to earn Victoria's respect. I regret staying silent when she took credit for my work. I regret not standing up for myself sooner, but I don't regret walking out of that family photo. Sometimes losing your seat at their table is the first step to building your own. And my table? It's set exactly the way I want it.